She's the midnight mistress of fairies and dark mischief. He's the paranormal beacon of mystic fairs and government leaking. If the dark side had a prom, they would be the king and queen. They live the metaphysical and make a wicked awesome team. From every single culture in every corner of the globe, they creep the lore and legends just to keep you in the know. For some it's hyperbole, fantastical and myth. For them it's all too real and your paradigm will shift. It's forever Halloween with all treats and no tricks. He's got a thing for witches and she's all Stevie Nicks. So welcome to our carnival of the weird and the bizarre, where UFOs and curses take shape beneath the stars. Sit back, relax, open your mind and stay a few. It's time for John and Stacy, and do we have something for you? Welcome to the Paranormal Sideshow with your host, John and Stacy Edwards of ParanormalSideshow.com. Hello and welcome to the Paranormal Sideshow. I'm your host, John Edwards, and joined as always by my lovely wife, Stacy.
Hello.
And we found a really bad story this week.
We did.
I mean, it's a gruesome story.
Yes.
It was really, really gruesome.
Very detailed.
Very detailed, like too detailed probably.
Probably.
And I don't usually start a show out like this, right?
No.
We had some really cool stuff to talk about, some really cool things happening, some great news that we can't talk about, but that's still cool, right? And we're going to get to all that stuff. And we have a spectacular show for you guys. Just a spectacular show. The news is so vast and impressive that we had to actually cut off the day before just so we could go ahead and get it, because we were afraid we were going to have too many stories.
Too many, yes.
It's really a good week. So we're excited about that. But I'm going to kind of turn up the creep right off the show.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
I am ready to really take this to another level.
Okay.
At the beginning of the show. So I'm going to put a little disclaimer out. If you have any young little ones running around right now and you're all huddled around a radio like it's 1932, because that's how I see all of it. I like to think in my head that everybody's there in their living room. You ever seen the pictures, you know, and they're
like tuning in the radio.
The kids are in the floor staring at the box, you know, with their fist underneath their chins. Right. And they're just staring at the box, just imagining.
Why did kids do that? Stare at the radio while it was playing?
Because they had really good imaginations back then, I guess. Think about all the games that they played with sticks and stuff, and everything was centered around, you know, their imagination. True. That's probably why that generation was so good at inventing things. Probably. But anyway, this story that I'm going to get into, it was very odd how we found it. So we were at the bookstore, and I just happened to pick up a haunted local book. That's not really my jam. You know, every area you go to has little haunted books of local flavor, and you know, there's a local author that has written about these haunted places. And yeah, they're cool because Stacy and I, we love to track down folklore. We love to track down, you know, local legends and see if there's any validity to them. Right. It's really fun for us. But we've already got a few of those on Maine, and this just happened to be a Maine book that I didn't have. And I'm going to give a little bit of love out here. It's by author T.M. Gray, and she wrote Ghost of Maine, and it's pretty much for ghost hunters, as she puts on here on the back. Right. You know, it's for ghost hunters to find little haunted places out there, all that good stuff, yada, yada, yada. So I'm not expecting anything, you know, too grandiose. Right. Nothing too hardcore. Right. No, I'm expecting something like, well, you know, old man Willoughby and his lantern, you know, happens to walk down the train tracks right when trains are coming. Oh, and the white lady waiting for the ships to come back, you know, stuff like that. Main stuff. Right. Yeah. So what I was not expecting was this little story about the town that we live in, and about a brutal murder that happened on Wednesday, July 9th of 1806. Oh, do tell. So I'm going to talk about this because even she points out the fact that the 74 murders of Amityville are, you know, infamous, right? Right. Everybody points to those as being the most gruesome, or not the most, but just I mean, there's so much most shocking. Yeah, shocking. There's so much haunting going on around that. So I read this story, and it just so happened I opened a book to this. Wow. And I read this story, and it gets really creepy. We'll get to the super creepy part here in a moment. I warn you, I'm going to get a bit descriptive because I really want people to know about this, and I don't think many people do.
No.
And it's one of those stories that I can't believe there's not a major motion picture about this horrific event, right? So anyway, it was, like I said, on Wednesday, July 9th, 1806, there was a Captain James Purrington, all right? And Captain James Purrington ended up slaying his whole entire family, except for his son, James Purrington Jr. And actually, he had a daughter that survived too shortly, not very long. She succumbed to the wounds eventually. But it was an axe and a straight razor that did all of the killing.
Oh my goodness.
And the story itself is shocking. The story itself is very strange as to how all of this occurred. So the lady who came over and discovered after the young man had ran to their house was a family friend, and her husband, they were an elderly couple, and she called it the most shocking scene that was ever seen in this part of the world at the time, probably still yet. The house seemed bathed in blood. The local newspaper described the gruesome murder-suicide, and this is how they described it. In the outer room lay prostrate on his face and weltering in his gore, the perpetrator of the dreadful deed, his throat cut in the most shocking manner, and a bloody razor lying on the table by his side. Mrs. Betsy Purrington lay on a blood-soaked bed, her head nearly severed from her neck. Beside her on the floor lay the body of her 10-year-old daughter, who no doubt ran to her mother upon hearing the frightful cries in the night. In another bedroom, 3 more daughters lie dreadfully butchered. The 19-year-old and 18-month-old were dead. In this room, Martha Purrington alone managed to survive, her body partially covering the baby sister she tried to save, despite being desperately wounded herself. In another bedroom, the 2 youngest boys, ages 6 and 8, lie in bed, their throats slashed open. On the hearth, dreadfully mangled, sprawled the body of 12-year-old son, his trousers tucked under his arm. He'd been cut down while trying to escape and left a bloody handprint smeared on the breastwork over the fireplace. The whole house seemed covered in blood, according to the Gazette, and near the body of the murderer lay the deadly axe. They said Captain James Purrington was 46 years of age. He had recently moved with his wife Betsy and their 8 children to the town. By all appearances, the captain was a good man who owned a handsome estate. According to 1806 tax records, he was doing quite well for himself and his family. He had 2 acres of land and 4 acres of pasture, 94 acres of unimproved land. On the Sunday before the murders, however, this is one of the parts I found really strange, Captain Purrington wrote a letter to his brother. It was to inform him that he would be dead by the time the letter was delivered. In the letter, he asked his brother to care for his family after he was gone. The strange correspondence was marked with Black Death's head, sealed with black wax.
That's very strange.
Yeah, it's very strange. So Betsy found her husband's gloomy letter before it was ever sent, and for reasons unknown, opened it on Monday, 2 days before the terrible Wednesday. Reading it gave her great alarm, but the captain assured her that he had no intention whatsoever of committing suicide. He told her he had experienced a premonition of his own death, nothing more. So there was some talk also about the religion that they were universalist, and it's less conservative than what most religions were. They didn't believe there was any real accountability after death, and everybody was okay. And at that time, you didn't really have that much acceptance of other people. So there was some talk of that, but really some of the real strangeness was what happened that night. What happened when everybody went to bed. He stayed up reading the Bible on that Wednesday night, and the day before he had sharpened all his tools and all this stuff. But this all occurred at 3 a.m.
Oh, that's strange.
Yeah, it's really strange. It all occurred at 3 a.m. And it's just, you put all that together when there's no real reason for this to happen.
Right. And
then the weird letter and the death premonition, and he's asking his brother to take care of his family, but he kills his family.
Yeah, it's very weird.
It's very weird, right? And it just doesn't add up. So it gets creepier though for us.
Okay.
The people here in town carried 7 coffins into the cemetery. Okay. Mm-hmm. The cemetery is actually the cemetery that's 2 blocks from our house. Mm-hmm. And
very close.
Yeah, we've taken pictures in there, everything. Mm-hmm. They were lost for a long time. The graves were, but then they, discovered that they were right there. Mm-hmm. The 8th coffin of him was not buried with the family.
No, I would say not.
It was buried at the corner of a street, mm-hmm. and that street's a block from our house.
Yes.
And he's buried basically under the street, and they're sure he's there now. And they also threw the bloody axe and the razor on top of the grave. Oh. And so that bloody axe and that razor is less than a block away from where we're at right now.
Just buried in the ground.
Yeah, just buried in the ground. The other daughter that had survived, the Martha, she died as well. Mm-hmm. So, there was actually 8 murders. Mm-hmm. And then
the suicide. And then the one son did survive.
The one son did survive.
That's a creepy story.
It's a very, very creepy story. Mm-hmm. And it's one that you don't really hear that much, if ever, really. You would think that one would have gotten out more. You would think that there's also some, it's definitely a brewing for hauntings. Mm-hmm. I would hope that the children and everyone didn't have to stay around or somewhere better.
Right.
But definitely you would think that if there was a soul that was damned to walk this earth, mm-hmm. that Captain James Purrington would be one of those. So yeah, now I could talk about fun stuff. I just thought it was really crazy. I thought, hey, let's share that.
Well, it's interesting that the first thing you read in this book that we wouldn't normally buy is a ghost story that's so close to where we live.
My God, guys, if I could really show you how close this is, well, I don't know.
You could probably throw a rock.
Yeah.
Maybe if you threw it really hard.
Yeah, well, Cody could throw a rock and hit it. I could throw a rock and break the neighbor's window out. But yeah, it's really, really close, and it's just a creepy story, man. It's just it's really gets to me because that's such a terrible story. But hey, last week we talked about something a little bit weird, and that was the fact of me seeing that apparition, and
right.
That's not a normal thing for me to see apparitions.
Right, and you got the mark on your neck
and
all that.
Got the mark on the neck that we took the pictures of and everything. Well, fast forward a couple of days, and I'm on my way to the doctor. On my way to the doctor for a regular checkup. I'm with Stacy, and I get a pain in my back. Mm-hmm. And so we travel, and I'm telling her about it. I'm like, I got this burning sensation in my back. Mm-hmm. So we go to the doctor, all good, and we go eat. We like to go eat at the local places. That's the only place we really like to eat at, unless it's Stacy and her hankering for some Texas Roadhouse bread. I will say
it's so delicious.
Yeah, when the hankering comes, Daddy has to take it's #bread time. So anyway, we were at a local place, and we always like to eat at local places. Mm-hmm. And it was in a town called Belfast. Mm-hmm. And so we got out, and we were parked on the street, and I opened the door for Stacy to let her get in.
He always does that. He's so sweet.
Yeah, don't out me. And so I opened the door, and she was getting in, and this is going to sound crazy, but hey, it's the Paranormal Sideshow.
That's right.
This figure appeared, and it was like he appeared out of smoke. Mm-hmm. Very clear afternoon, and it was really nice. It was like 6 p.m. It's very nice. The weather was good, a little bit chilly, but it was nice. And it was the old, just old brick sidewalk, and he looked like he was wearing 1930s clothes. It was very sudden, and it was like he appeared, but he was already in full stride as he appeared. And it was like he touched me on the back, and I was a little bit freaked out. Right. I went around to the car, and I told Stacy what happened.
And didn't he touch you in the exact spot that you had been hurting?
In the exact spot I'd been hurting. Mm-hmm. So Stacy was, starting to run off. She's like, well, maybe he's trying to help you. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. So we go quite a few miles, probably 20 miles. And it was burning. And I was just like, look, my back is burning. It is killing me. I'm going to stop. So I stop, I open the door, I pull up my shirt, and I was like, is there anything red back there?
It was a terrible, terrible mark. A huge, long, red, welty looking mark. It was awful.
Yeah, it wasn't just like an irritated skin mark or like you scratch yourself or anything like that. This was something looking like it was trying to get out from the inside.
Yeah, like when you pinch yourself and it doesn't break the skin, but all the blood under there.
But
like,
it comes as close as it possibly could.
Yeah.
That's she took a picture of it and showed me. So I don't have that mark now, but we have the pictures, and that's 2 times in a week.
I think the fact that it went away that quickly is pretty amazing too.
It's weird. It's weird.
Very weird.
Yeah, it's just a strange story, and of course we share everything with you guys, everything paranormal and probably everything non-paranormal.
A little too much sometimes, I think.
TMI. But yeah, we just thought it was very strange, So there's a couple of our weird stories for you. If you want to find out some other weird stuff, ParanormalSideshow.com. That's your address to find out everything Pinchy. On Facebook, it's Facebook.com/ParanormalSideshow. On the Twitter, it's @Sideshow97. Instagram, Hot Pinchy Dam. It's John and Stacey Edwards. YouTube.com/ParanormalSideshow has all our cool videos that we are producing like crazy. There's, mystery booms. There's all kinds of stuff. We have the crazy recaps of the podcast with our special stuff in it. A lot of stuff for you to check out. Please go check out youtube.com/ParanormalSideshow. And I got to talk about the patrons.
Yes.
I got to talk about that. We have some awesome people out there who have signed up on our Patreon and have taken, your levels, whether it be $10 level, $25 level, $5 level. It has really been awesome to see that start taking off. We really appreciate it. We're starting to get, on our way toward our goal of being able to bring you the most awesome content in the world, and that would be us, by the way, in case you're wondering. But no, 100% gonna put everything back in and really appreciate more than I can express every one of you who has got on the Patreon and donated and signed up and become patrons. It's patreon.com/paranormalsideshow. That is the address, and we really appreciate it. We can't wait to start, sending everything out for those of you who have signed up. And of course, people who have done like the $5 level has already started getting their Haunted South episodes.
Yes.
Some of the back catalog that's on there. So, cool stuff. We appreciate every one of you so much. And I think right now, even after all those creepy stories, that it might be time for some paranormal news. And it's going to be some good stuff.
All right, so let's get to the news. Well, the first story is about the strange wolf-like animal that was killed in Montana, and the wildlife officials are puzzled.
They are baffled. It's a crazy story.
It is. It was a large wolf-like animal. It actually was shot by a ranch owner. It got a little too close to his livestock.
You don't look like us. Kill it.
And he shot it. And when he went to go see what it was, he had to call the wildlife people because he had no idea. It didn't look like a wolf.
It's hard to find them when you look them up in the yellow pages. Wildlife people. When you don't know what you just shot.
The Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Those guys are straight up gangsta. If you're in Montana, if you are in Montana, those guys are gangsta. Those guys have seen some crap.
Have to be.
Right?
Yes.
Those guys get hush money every few months. It's like, hey guys, you absolutely did not see those Sasquatch bodies. All right. So how much is it going to cost? Keep it coming, sir. 50, 100, 150. That's cute. Keep it coming. 200. You can only imagine.
I know.
It's Montana.
Well, the wolves.
They're like the only witnesses.
The wolf specialist looked at the photos of the animal. The guy took photos of it and said that it's definitely not a purebred wolf, that the canine teeth are too short.
Right.
And the paws were too small.
Right.
And the claws on the front paws were too long. It does look wolf-like, like maybe it's a hybrid.
Right.
But it has like gray hair. It's just, they know for sure it's definitely not a normal wolf.
Maybe it's an inbred wolf.
It could be.
Maybe there's a long line of like inbred wolvery up on the mountain.
The poor wolf was just trying to get away from the pack because they've been making fun of him.
Yeah.
And this ranger went and shot him. Poor thing.
It's like, that's Jim Bob and Billy Sue's little doggy. I don't know what's wrong with me, Mommy and Daddy. I look kind of like yins, but I don't look like yins.
Oh, gosh.
Sorry.
So they sent the wolf's body off to a lab to be studied, and they are taking DNA samples. So instead of just trying to guess and, make assumptions for what it is, they actually want to have the DNA tested so they can know for sure.
Yeah, that's because it was Montana and they don't have they didn't know. So everybody's going to be dead. Mm-hmm. Run now if you're listening and you're part of the story.
Right.
Because whatever this was that you guys just found, this crazy wolf-like creature, I don't know. It's really crazy. It's not that huge or anything. You're always hoping it's a werewolf.
Right.
Their wolf. Their castle. Sorry. You're always hoping it's a werewolf. And or at least I'm always hoping it's a werewolf. You're always hoping it's a werewolf unless it's in your neighborhood.
Right.
You know. But I don't know. It's interesting because you don't see these kind of stories every day. Although Mr. Crypto himself, one of my good buddies, David Weatherly, I was talking to him about this story. I sent it to him. Right. And I was just like, hey, you got to see this, right? And he's actually seen a few weird stories like this recently. And, so it was, I don't know, a lot of weird animal behavior lately, right?
Yes.
There's been a lot of weird animal stuff. So very strange that we have another animal story, except this time it's the fact that it's a weird, we've never seen this before. Right. And I'm sure it's just some sort of malformed.
Sure like an anomaly or something. And the spokesman did say that it would probably take weeks or months to get the DNA results back.
I think I've seen a two-headed deer recently.
I think so. You see that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah, so they're going to get the DNA results back, and then the wolves are going to be really upset when they find out they're not actually from Scandinavia. they're going to be like, "Oh my God, our wolfery is from
our wolfery."
Yes, it's a wolfery. It's like having a fishery. But anyway, it's a cool story, and hopefully we'll have an update.
It is. I hope so, but you know how that goes. Sometimes they just never mention it again.
So I want to go back and do a YouTube video of me opening my results from my DNA. So I got hooked on watching people opening DNA results. Right. And it's so fun when it's not what they think it was. It's so fun when I watched this poor girl, and I think you were still awake. I watched this poor girl open her results, and her dad's like 50-some% Italian. Nobody is usually that much of a percent of anything. Right. So he's always told her, he's like, "Oh yeah, we're full-blooded Italians." Well, he probably told her like, "Hey, what do you know? Who the hell know?" Anyway, to all my Italians out there, I love you very much. I'm a huge fan of Italians, especially Italian girls from New Jersey. Just saying that my wife looks suspiciously a lot like. But anyway, it was so sad, but yet I couldn't take my eyes away because you knew where it was heading. She was like looking at her results after she waited, and it was like Molly, and like she was like Hispanic. It was so funny.
It was not one drop of Italian.
Not one drop of Italian. So
not even a speck.
She had her dad's results right beside it, and she's kind of like, so it's looking like it says I'm Hispanic and I'm got a lot of African in me. This doesn't look like my father's at all. And it like kind of like ding ding ding.
Yeah, like the light bulbs were going off.
Yeah, poor girl was 27, but I got hooked on them. So I can't take my eyes off these things is the long and short of it, because it's really cool. I want to go back and do mine again and make it seem like it was real. I mean, of course everybody that would watch it has just listened to that. Yes. So,
and they heard us talking about your results.
Yeah, quite a few times. Because I'm a freaking Viking. Because I'm all Viking. Of course I'm going to talk about my results. I'm sorry. The part that's not Viking is freaking Northern Ireland. I'm like badass all the way around. There wasn't any like squirrely man in there anywhere.
Squirrely man.
Yeah, it was all like, I'm going to build a boat and conquer a nation and then conquer the girls. You know, it was like all.
It explains so much.
It really does.
Yes.
That's why you like me.
How could I resist, right?
I know. It's futile. Resistance is futile.
All right, well, let's move on to this next story.
Let's move on. I'm feeling rather Viking right now. I want to blow a horn and have it repeat down the street like. I just want to do that once in my life. In my head, since I was a kid, I've always loved that more than anything. I've always imagined that I've had somebody on the hill waiting.
Right.
Right. So I'm kind of half scared to actually get the horn someday. And the fact there was really some dude waiting this whole time.
For you to blow a horn.
Ever since I was a kid, I would play that game. And I don't know what I seen to start with that seen that, you know, or where I got that from. But my friends would always be like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm warning the other castles. I'm warning the other holds, and they're letting me know they heard, and they're preparing for battle. And I don't know where that came from, because I've done that since I was a little kid, and they would always giggle, you know, because all my friends, and I'd get real mad.
Right.
But every time I put my hand on my ear, I'd make the thing myself, you know. Yeah, so I'm a weird kid still.
Still, yes. All right, so let's move on to this next story. And this is a story about how a U.S. consulate worker in China has suffered an injury.
This is so weird.
After hearing odd sounds that was similar to the Cuba case.
This is so weird, guys. Okay, this one, I'm not even going to interrupt that much. You got to hear this. This is bananas. And hopefully the ones of you who take notes remember the Cuba case, but we'll refresh you a little.
Yes. So before, when we did the story about Cuba, you know, there was a lot of different embassy workers in Cuba that started having these weird illnesses and feeling dizzy and nauseous and sick, and they ended up bringing them home because they were all getting ill. And after they came home and they did tests on them, they noticed that they had brain injuries and their brain matter had changed, and they had no idea why. The conspiracy theory is that somebody had used a sonic weapon on them, but you know, Cuba claims absolutely that's not what happened. So now fast forward to this incident in China.
A lot of trust between us and Cuba.
Where this one government worker had to be brought home. And when he was brought home, he was actually diagnosed with a mild traumatic brain injury. Okay. And he has not hit his head, not had an accident. Nothing has happened like that.
Okay. And the State Department issued a travel warning, right? For going there. Not that that's a hot destination or anything.
Right.
But probably for, you know, workers and you know, people that would do that kind of thing. So this is very top level, eyes only. Guys, this is a conspiracy. And I'm not even going to play around. There is something happening. I don't believe in coincidence, especially when the coincidence is my gray matter changed. Or my mental waves changed.
Yeah, or I had a concussion when I didn't have a concussion or whatever.
Right. When you're in the same type of place, okay, both of these incidents happened in U.S. embassies, completely nowhere near each other. You got one in Cuba, you got one in China, neither of which are we very close to, okay? It would be more likely that Cuba and China are very close than us being close with either one, especially here recently, considering some of the trade embargoes and whatnot that we've had with China. Now, we just recently opened up the ability to even travel and stuff with Cuba in just very recent future. But nonetheless, I'm not even going to play around on this. This, to me, is a out and out energy weapon of some type, and we know that they're out there. We've heard about these for 20 years probably, death rays or whatever you want to call it. You know, there's been a lot of whistleblowers come out around these, and this sounds like it, and that's terrifying. Now, I know that a lot of people are like me. In the last couple of years, you know, there's this thing called tinnitus, where you hear a ringing in your ears, okay? And it'll go away normally after a few days, maybe even a few hours, right? It's very irritating, and when it happens and you notice it, it's hard to enjoy life. It's hard to enjoy anything. I've had some form of tinnitus for about 3 or 4 years. Now, I have perfect blood pressure. I don't have anything like that, like you would think medicine side effect.
That would cause it.
Right. Any kind of medicinal side effect or anything like that. It's not like that. Now, it does increase with paranormal activity. So there is a chance with me that it's all based on paranormal activity. I know with Stacy, she gets extremely tired when she is being approached by a spirit.
Yes.
And with me, I get anxious. I usually feel what's going on. Sometimes if you see me get angry for no reason, then I probably have some kind of attachment. But back to this weapon or whatever this is, I hope they don't sweep this under the rug too much, because I'm sorry, again, I don't believe in coincidences at all. Right. And this is a humongous quinky dink to try to pass off.
Well, it really is, because they even said that the symptoms were very similar and entirely consistent. And we talked about the people in Cuba hearing like the scratching noises and the, hearing all the weird sounds and getting the pressure in their head. And, this particular government worker also had pressure around the head and all of the same type of symptoms that, the people in Cuba had. And I will point out that it does say in this article that the Chinese foreign minister is actually preparing to meet with officials in Washington to discuss, trade and things like that.
Maybe it's all the demons in our government.
You think so?
They've got like a demon in the next room over, and it's kind of like bleeding through. They're having to call him right now from, the CIA, and they're like, I hate calling this guy. You gotta call him, sir. I hate calling this guy. You gotta call him, sir. We got people getting sick. Fine. Hello. Beelzebub. Yes. You gotta stop with the soul crushing. It's. I know you're trying to fill those soul gems, but it's really causing disruptions. We moved you from Cuba. We put you in China. We didn't think, what could he do in China? There's a lot of people there, right? Who's going to notice a few that go missing? But here it goes once again, and it's affecting our own people. I can't tell them apart. They're in the same building as you. I'm sorry. Not that we have demons in our government.
Right.
But one would think sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, you never know.
You never know.
Well, we also had that story about the Canadian government that removed their employees from their families from Cuba as well. Yeah. So it's not just our government that's worried about this.
Right.
It's other governments have heard about it. And until they find an answer for it, it's all up in the air.
I hear the French left before anybody.
Well, let's move on to the next story.
Let's.
And this is a story about the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh, yeah.
And this story is about how some Kiwi scientists are going to hunt for the Loch Ness Monster. And
as opposed to hunting the Loch Ness Monster.
Yes, they're actually trying to find
I'm surprised we haven't seen that gem of a TV show yet.
Well,
hunting Loch Ness.
The scientists are going to use what's called environmental DNA sampling, where you take samples of the water and you just sample whatever DNA you can find in the water. It's something that they use quite often.
Be suspect in a pool. Never mind. Just thinking of some of the pool parties from high school.
Well, they say that whenever a creature moves through its environment, it leaves behind tiny fragments of, DNA, like poop, skin, scales, feathers, fur, feces, urine, all of that. So if they just take samples of the water and they test it for different types of DNA, and they happen to come across some that they've never seen before, then there you go. It could be the Loch Ness Monster. You never know.
Things you couldn't do in New Jersey.
Well, the whole purpose of doing this is not specifically just looking for the Loch Ness Monster. They actually are studying all of the different types of life in Loch Ness.
No, dear. That's how they get their funding.
I see. They are actually just looking for...
They're obviously just looking for Loch Ness Monster. Everybody has to come up with something else, No, sir, that's absolutely... I mean, that's a nice little thing. We can tell the people and the papers will get behind it, but absolutely not. I mean, I want to do this for a scientific reason. I'm worried about the algae.
Well, they are going to make a detailed list of all the life living in Loch Ness, and hopefully they find something they've never seen before.
I hope they find a mermaid.
That would be awesome.
It would be, wouldn't it? Like looking for the Loch Ness Monster and you find a mermaid.
All right, so let's move on to this next story. And this is about the Department of Defense and, how they came out and said they had the Pentagon doing the program, the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. So this is a little update to that. And this is just a story about how the Department of Defense contracted dozens of researchers to look into some things that were a little unconventional. And a document that was dated April 2nd, 2010 was titled Warp Drive, Dark Energy, and Manipulation of Extra Dimensions.
That's insanity.
Yes, it's like a 34-page report, and it listed all this different information about warp drives and how to manipulate the dimensions and things like that. And people thought it was pretty strange that the government was actually looking in.
You think?
To those sorts of things. And it does say in this article that this was done for a program called the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program.
Right.
Now, this is the bigger program that the other program was in, and they didn't really talk about that particular name of the program. That came out later. So, there's another theoretical physicist that's kind of poo-pooing on the report, saying that it's too bright and sunshiny, and all of these things that it's saying are not really as easy as they're claiming that they are, and that even if we figure all these things out, it's going to be, thousands of years before we have any kind of hardware that could manipulate that sort of stuff.
I think he's wrong.
You think so?
Yeah, I think you can go back to 1943 and the Philadelphia experiment. I believe that actually happened. I believe that, the end of October in 1943, that a Navy destroyer, the USS Eldridge, disappeared.
Yes.
Showed up somewhere else.
Yep.
I think that there were sailors caught in the metal and all those horrific things. If you've never looked into the Philadelphia experiment, please do.
It's horrifying.
It is, but I believe that we've been working on this stuff for eons, and I believe that the Nazi bell showed up in the United States, and I believe that all these things happen, especially like with time slips.
Right.
I absolutely believe in time slips, and I believe that once we've harnessed that we can manipulate that. I believe the CERN has a lot to do with that kind of research. We just recently in the same book that we were that we actually found the story that we started the show off with today.
Yes.
We found an amazingly cool time slip story that we had never heard again.
Yes.
Another story from that book, but from out of Maine, which was amazing.
It was a
really cool story. You should tell the story.
All right, so I'll just kind of paraphrase the story for you. So basically, in June of 1962, this man and his wife took off in their little plane, just a little Cessna, and they were headed for Portland. And it was pretty good weather, just some puffy clouds, no bad weather or anything like that.
Right.
And out from behind a cloud, an old-fashioned plane came flying like right at them. And so he kind of banked out of the way, but their wingtips hit midair.
It was like a biplane.
Yeah, it was like in midair, and it just clipped the end of the wing. And so the pilot, he radioed a mayday call on the emergency channel. And when Portland responded, they cleared him for landing, and he met with agents of the FAA. And they answered questions and filled out forms, and they said that they couldn't take their plane home until, the other guy reported the incident. Because that's the way that it works. So after a week went by, they still hadn't heard anything. And so after about a year, the insurance company reluctantly agreed to take some paint samples from the damaged wing. And so the samples were taken to, the FAA lab. Because
the insurance people thought it was a sham.
Right. They thought they were just trying to get money out of it. And they found that the samples contained yellow paint and cloth fabric that dated back to like the 1920s.
Right.
And so even though this was really strange information, they did pay the claim and let him have his plane back, because obviously he did get hit by another plane.
Right.
So let's move forward to 1982.
Right.
Okay. In May of 1982. So this college student that's actually from Maine went to Nebraska with his roommate to help them clean out like an old barn that was on his family's farm. And the barn was huge. It was like 4 stories tall. It was crammed full of stuff.
Right.
And so they worked on it for like 2 weeks, and they were hauling things out. And finally, all they had left was this big pile of hay at the back of the barn. So under the hay, they found an old yellow biplane. It was a 1915 Faulkner, and it looked like it was in great condition except for some damage to one of the wingtips.
Right.
So in the cockpit, they found the pilot's log, and the pilot's name was Waldo Pettit, and he had bought the plane in 1920, and he recorded all of his flights in detail, and the very last page was dated June 10th, 1932. And according to the log, him and his wife were heading home, and they spotted another plane flying straight at them, and their wingtips collided. And then they watched the other plane just disappear into the sky above them. And so when they got home, they put their plane in the barn because they didn't have a chance to fix it right at the time. So I thought the story was super fascinating. So that night, the college student from Maine, his dad called, and he told his dad about the plane and the story and the log they found. And his dad was like, I know this couple from Maine that had a mid-air collision with an old biplane. It sounded really similar to that. So, this college student was like, that's really strange. So he wondered if the FAA had ever received a report about the crash. And he called them, and the FAA actually dispatched a field agent to Nebraska to look at the biplane that they had found. And the paint on that biplane matched the paint on the Cessna that the other man from Maine was flying. Yes. But the FAA also said that there was no way the biplane had been flown within the last 50 years. But they did get a letter that was sent to the Omaha airport dated June 12th, 1932 from Waldo Pettit saying that he did have a midair collision with a strange looking monoplane.
That's crazy.
So Waldo Pettit, June 1932, hit the other pilot in June of 1962.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was found out in 1982.
Yeah, very crazy.
Such a crazy story.
Both these people experienced this in midair, 30 years apart, but at the same time.
Right.
Time slip.
Yes.
And
I love that story. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's very crazy. And it makes you want to go and when we get to 2022, maybe, and, right at the right spot and see if we see anything, really nuts. And plus that's another one here right beside us. But it's in that whole realm of time slip, and there's so many time slip stories. There's so many stories about the guy like in New York City that all of a sudden he came from out of time and was very confused and got hit by a vehicle, right? And he had like coins and everything from another time, another era, and just crazy stuff. I believe in this. I believe in time slips. I believe in bleed through. I believe that the skyquakes that we hear is dimensions shifting against each other. So I don't know.
So do you think the time slips are actually going back and forward in time or slipping dimensions?
I believe that it's slipping dimensions. I don't know. I mean it's tomato really. Right. It's weird. For some way somehow I believe most everything's happening at the same time. Right. And I think that a lot of things get affected and changed, and I believe that could explain Mandela. I believe there's a lot of things that do change throughout the course of time. It's really strange. It is. The whole thing's strange.
It makes your brain hurt sometimes trying to
it does
wrap your head around some of it.
It does. Some of the things we've experienced in our lives that have there's no explanation, and most anybody who listens to the show has had strange events, whether it's ufology or some cryptid that you've seen or a paranormal encounter. The truth is much stranger than fiction. It really is.
I agree. All right, well, let's move on. And here's a story I just kind of wanted to mention because it had one of those weird coincidental things to it. And this is about the sinkhole that opened up on the White House lawn. Yes. And you've probably seen this in the news. Part of the ground on the White House north lawn just kind of caved in. It was a big hole. It was near the fence. Of course, people made tons of jokes about, the sinkhole in the White House. But what I thought was really strange about it is that it happened almost exactly to the day, 1 year since a sinkhole opened up at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's place in Palm Beach, Florida. So I thought that was really kind of funny that he's had these sinkholes at both of his places that he's at.
Almost a year later, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty strange. I mean, the sinkhole's not strange anymore.
No, because they just happen all the time now.
Yeah, that's something else we talked about. I know in the early days of Haunted South, which you can listen to if you're a Patreon member.
Yes, you can.
But we would talk about sinkholes. We would loop that in with our mysterious booms and the skyquakes.
We didn't really see them all that much then.
We talked about being a kid and growing up and watching, NBC Nightly News or something, and you never heard about these things. Like, it was very, very rare, and I don't remember hearing anything about major sinkholes and that would just pop up like they do now.
Right. And see, they claim it's because they've gotten tons of rain, and just lots of rain have caused a sinkhole, but like you said, we didn't used to hear about it, and it's rained a lot of other times.
I wonder how much rain has hit the White House lawn at times. It's just, right. I'd say that one is probably some underground bunker deal that's fell in.
Oh, who knows what's underneath?
Oh yeah,
Washington D.C. Oh my God.
Yeah,
all kinds of hidden things. Yeah. All kinds.
I mean, there's enough hidden things in plain sight there that's, harking to Egyptian gods and whatnot. Just in the architecture.
Oh yeah.
So God knows what's underground. They probably have like the city, the tunnel of death or whatever. It's hard to imagine.
Well, let's move on to this next story. And I thought this one was really, really interesting. So this is about a fire that was at a church in Serbia. And the firefighters that were battling the blaze were stunned to discover that 3 religious icons had shockingly survived the inferno. So this building basically burnt all the way.
Inferno is a strong word.
But it was pretty bad. But they had 3 pictures. They were paintings. One was Jesus, one was John the Baptist, and one was the Apostle Peter. And they were found with their faces largely intact and just a little bit of burning around the edges. But it's the only thing that survived the fire.
Wow.
And so, of course, they're calling it,
a miracle.
A miracle. And it's amazing. And people are wondering how these particular pictures survived. And I believe that they were just up like in an attic area. And some people said, well, maybe they were painted on gold or something like that, but that wasn't really confirmed. I mean, they just look like regular paintings. So it's kind of an odd incident, and it's not the first time that we've had stories where religious artifacts have survived fires. In fact, when they had all those fires in Gatlinburg recently.
Yeah.
We kind of followed that pretty closely because, that's home for us. But there was a couple of stories where there were statues of Jesus. That was the only thing left standing in a yard, several different residences. And then, of course, they had the park bench where everything was burned around it. But then there was the page from the Bible that was still sitting there that had not burnt. And everybody thought that was amazing. And especially since it was a passage from the book of Joel that was asking for God's help in the face of a massive inferno. So it just made it that.
Just nuts.
Yeah. And I actually will link to this other article that I read, and it was in the Catholic Herald, I think.
Yeah.
It was one of those papers. And it's an older article from a couple years ago, but it lists several examples of different fires through history where religious relics survived. And a lot of times it was a religious relic that people really loved or looked at a lot or touched or held in very high regard. A lot of times it's the Virgin Mary or some other, lady.
Well, I mean, just think about the things we've seen happen with religious artifacts, with the eyes following you. It looks like sometimes the heads move.
Right.
Especially with Jesus on the cross. I'll tell you, that would not make me go get saved. There would be like a John size, like cartoon frame of me going through the wall. I can take ghost. I could take UFO landing in my lawn right now, and aliens getting out. I really could. I couldn't take the creepy imagery of one of those full-size Jesus on the cross moving his freaking head. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that would be terrifying.
That is just too much for me. I've talked before about how shockingly scary Catholic imagery is.
Yes.
When you're in a Catholic church, it's terrifying.
It is.
I mean, I know it's beautiful and it's great artwork.
Well, I mean, I went to a Catholic church. It is very overwhelming.
But it's very, you're supposed to feel some gloom and I mean, you're supposed to get that emotion.
In awe.
Yeah, you're supposed to get that emotion. It's supposed to be, I get it, But a lot of, these artifacts, we've heard weird stories about these, always.
Yes.
To crying, blood, and everything else,
Crazy thing. And, that one article in the Catholic Herald, the guy was talking about a fire that went in this one guy's bedroom, and he had this little bit of earth from Fatima, where they had the...
Oh, yeah, I know.
It was just in a little plastic container. It wasn't, in glass or anything like that, and it miraculously was not burnt at all, and tons of plastic, other religious things, rosaries and things like that, those all melted and burned.
I wonder if I could buy some dirt from Fatima.
I don't know.
I would like to visit that place.
It probably wouldn't mean as much unless you went and got it yourself.
Yeah, I would love to visit that one because that's one of my favorite. With the immense number of eyewitnesses, that's one we should cover sometime.
Yeah.
It's just the high number of eyewitnesses for that and for that miracle. It's just so crazy. The whole story's nuts, and then the having the secrets that they don't read. The last one,
right? I remember seeing that story when I was younger on like Unsolved Mysteries. It's so fascinating, like the way they do it on there.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's also kind of like woo.
So, do you think that these religious relics that they perhaps survive these fires because of the amount of energy that people are putting in them?
I don't know.
Or putting towards them.
I mean, that is that is something that is a good assumption. I mean, or a good theory. I personally think that maybe there's something watching out for them myself.
Possibly.
I'm sure that everybody listening has their own opinions.
I'm sure.
And they probably vary from person to person,
Right.
In this field, I can tell you this much. After being in the field for a long time, the one solid that I do know is there's something else.
Yes. Well, we also, back when we did our show on curses, we talked about that painting that supposedly started fires.
Oh, gosh.
The crying boy painting.
That thing, I don't even want to look at it.
Right.
I mean, I really don't. But yeah, it starts fires.
And then it would survive the fire. And it would be the only thing that survives.
So yeah,
That's creepy.
That does give more credence to your theory of maybe there's a lot of energy in it. Maybe this puts some kind of protection around these things.
Right.
I don't know, man. And when I say there's something more, that's why we do it is the hunt for this stuff, and just more answers. Of course, because it doesn't correspond with a lot of the things it's supposed to be, right?
Right.
Like sleeping and waking up, it's not, we're hearing these voices and having this communication, and then it goes down to is it all demons? Is it human spirits? And it really for us, it's always come up that it's more like human spirits. So I don't know. It's very, very interesting.
Very cool. Okay, well, let's move on. I got a few more stories here. So this one's about a curse.
Oh boy, I love curses.
And this is the kind of curse that we talk about a lot, where somebody took an object from a location that they were not supposed to take something from.
We've told you.
Yes.
That's in our rules of investigating.
Heed those warnings, people.
I mean, there's actually... We have written this down in blogs. We've written it we have talked about this a million times. This is like rule number 3 or 4 of things not to do.
We might have to bump it up.
Even, and we've talked about this before, Tina at Waverly told us, that people will mail back pieces that...
people will take bricks and stuff.
Yeah, and they'll mail them back going... Please take this.
Exactly. Well, this is about a man in Australia who went to visit the Uluru Rock. Sometimes it's called the Ayers Rock. It's a really famous landmark. It's Aboriginal in Australia. It's like in central Australia. And he went, and he was told before he went to be very respectful, not to take anything, that it would give him bad luck.
Right.
But he was walking around and he saw this rock and he thought, I know they told me not to take anything, but I really want to have this rock. And so he put it in his pocket.
Oh my gosh.
And he took it home with him. So here's what happened to him. So on the way home through the outback in Queensland, kangaroos started jumping at his car. Like instead of moving out of the way, they were actually slamming into his car.
Oh no.
And he had to get his car. It was like $13,000 worth of damage, because kangaroos are big.
Yeah, we've talked about them. They're very emasculating.
Yeah, and so and he said that he's driven extensively through the outback and never seen such behavior from kangaroos. So this is when he first started thinking, maybe I shouldn't have taken that rock, because he knew about the curse already. So he didn't return it yet, though. He just went home. So a few months later, while he was driving, his car actually just blew up. The engine started blowing blue smoke, and the mechanics, he said, are still mystified as to why it failed. Like he had no idea. So when he got home, he actually didn't take the rock inside. He wanted it for his mantelpiece. But when he got home after the thing that happened with the kangaroos, he thought it was a little bit too risky, and he put it in his garage. And he said that even his friends won't even touch it, and that he has constantly felt nervy since taking it, and it's given him like anxiety and things like that. And he said also that all the pictures that he took on his trip mysteriously vanished off his phone.
Wow.
So it's just been one thing after another, and he's been plagued with all these terrible feelings. So he's decided that he's going to return it. He's not just going to mail it back. He's like, I know exactly where I took it from. It was some significant spot. He said, I'm planning a trip anyway, and I'm just going to make a detour. It's a big detour. It's like 3,000 kilometers. He's going to detour back to the rock and replace what he took.
Wow.
Hoping that it will, break the curse that he obviously thought was baloney and didn't believe in.
Yeah.
And now has learned better.
Yeah, we should open a website where we just base it in that area, and we send those to your exes. Just as a gift. And just
we're going to go steal this rock and send it to your ex.
From a mysterious stranger, and make sure it's already in a nice little presentation piece.
Right.
Just so they can have.
That's funny. Well, the park where this rock is located, they actually receive.
Hope you have a good day.
They actually receive rocks in the mail all the time from people that took them, and then return them by mail because they're being
Every
cursed.
place we've ever visited
and
have that.
He said sometimes it takes them up to 40 years to return it, but they always mail it back. And since the people that work at the park, they're very respectful of the land, and they don't really know where the rocks were taken from. They don't want to offend, any kind of spirits or anything. So they have like a neutral location in a riverbed, and they just take the rocks there, and they're like, we're returning this, and they will leave them in that riverbed. And so hoping that kind of helps those people out.
That's so bananas, man.
Yes.
That is so bananas. And I mean, like I said, we've heard this in all the haunted locations we've been to, the big ones. They'll say, don't take a pebble. Don't take anything.
Don't take anything.
Yeah. But this is different. This sounds like some old dark magic, man. Well,
it says in here that, they don't recognize a specific curse associated with removing rocks, but that there are consequences for disrespecting the land. Yeah. So I assume taking something from this very holy site is very disrespectful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously that would cause a curse.
Not a place you want to take a leak.
No, absolutely not.
I'd hate to find out what
you probably wouldn't even make it out of the park.
Yeah, probably not. You have some kind of like kangaroo pounce.
Like you said, we have heard of a lot of places that have this kind of curse on it, and one that I was reading about is actually from Hawaii. They have the Hawaii Volcanic National Park where you go see the volcanoes, and supposedly if you take a lava rock from that park, you will have a curse. The lava rocks are cursed, and you're not supposed to take them.
Yeah, well, right now would probably not be a good time to take anything.
No, I don't think you can even go to the park right now.
I believe it. Yeah, wow.
So that was a pretty cool story.
It really is.
Hope that guy learned his lesson.
I doubt it.
All right, so I got two more stories, and this one is about a zombie alert that went out to residents in Florida.
We just had one of these last week.
No. Well, last week was a sign that somebody hacked. This is actually an alert that people got on their cell phones during a power outage.
Oh my God.
So the officials say they still don't know who sent it. And what happened was, when they did their own investigations, they determined that it wasn't any of the employees or former employees.
Right.
That somebody hacked in and edited some of the pre-prepared messages. It's because they have these warnings, like when the power goes out, they send a little pre-prepared, restoration time's uncertain and your power's out. And so somebody had hacked in there and edited that. So here's what the customers got on their cell phones. It said power outage and zombie alert for the residents of Lake Worth and Terminus. There are now far less than 7,380 customers involved due to extreme zombie activity. Restoration time uncertain.
Okay. So here's my thing with this. The power grid went down.
Right.
And it was an actual power outage. And so they already had this written and it was ready to go for a power outage.
Yeah, they have these
prepared
alerts that go out, and if like 7,800 customers were affected, it was only out for 30 minutes, something like that. So whenever there's an outage, it automatically alerts you on your cell phone.
The push alert,
yeah, so that you know basically how long it's going to be out and how many people were affected. So they tried to fix, like they knew about this hack a while back, and they tried to fix all of the messages, but apparently they missed this one. And I thought it was funny that it mentioned Terminus, from Walking Dead.
I like the fact that they always point out it wasn't one of their employees. It was. It was Johnson in Cubicle 3, and they're just like Johnson's like,
"Excuse me, sir. I would really like to. I would really like to have Memorial Day weekend off, sir. I wanted to grill the hot dogs and wave the flag, sir. And maybe some sparklers. Can I have that?
I'm sorry, Johnson. It's not going to happen this year, bud. Buck up, pal. Better luck next year. And, you got to put these things in 1 year in advance. So I'd go ahead and put that in.
There's not a calendar for next year, sir.
Well, sorry about that, pal. You're going to have to get over it. And, so Johnson.
Right.
Is like on that computer by himself in cubicle 3,
wearing his Walking Dead t-shirt.
Oh, dude, underneath his button up, right?
Right.
But he has his Rick Grimes like toys in front of him, or his little statues, or probably his bobblehead or something.
Right.
And he's sitting there. He's like, he's looking over at Rick Grimes. He's looking at his computer screen. He's looking at Rick Grimes, and he's looking at his computer screen, and he's like, all right. And he just hacks it all in. You know that's what happened.
Of course it is.
And he got to, he'll be working on Memorial Day. But by God, he's going to have a smile on his face.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. So I assume that the alert has now been fixed.
Yes.
All right. So last story, you're going to love this one. This happened in San Diego County in California. Okay. And there's a crematorium there, the Cortez family crematorium. And they accidentally, had an oven door that failed to close on the furnace of their crematorium. And it accidentally sent a heavy cloud of smoke out of the chimney and out of the open doors of the building. And this huge cloud had human remains in it.
Oh, no.
So it was a plume.
No.
The plume containing human remains blew up into the air and moved east across National City Boulevard and Broadway towards a shopping center where there was a Best Buy and a Walmart.
Oh, no.
And the smoke continued for at least a half an hour. And they say that the possible health impact of inhaling the smoke with the human remains is unclear. So they've reached out to the health officials about it.
That's so terrible.
I couldn't imagine going into Walmart and being like,
oh God,
what is that falling on me? What is that, ashes? What is that?
Yeah. Mommy, is this snow?
What is that?
Is that snow, Mommy? Let me stick my tongue out.
Oh my God.
It was just an accident. Obviously, they didn't do it intentionally, but what a terrible thing to happen.
I don't know. You know what? Johnson's cousin, he works in that crematorium, and he asked for Memorial Day off.
Right.
And he's like, oh yeah, all right, I'm going to put 7 Jane Does in this same furnace and just leave the door open. Oh, God. Good luck.
Oh, well, I hope that wasn't somebody that was expecting to get ashes of their loved one, because they're all over Walmart now.
It's kind of like, if that happened,
right?
That's kind of like me and that mystical site when I'm trying to build a hotel.
Right.
That you find down the street the next day, like, oh, hey, look what they found down there. We're building our hotel up here. You wouldn't have heard a word about this, okay?
Right.
If I had to throw coworkers in there.
Well, it went way up in the air. Yeah. It's not really.
Well, somebody would have got some, like, I don't know. Somebody would have got something. Some roadkill ashes.
We weren't burning people. We just threw some wood in there. We were cold.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be like, here's your cousin, ma'am. It's terrible. You can't laugh about stuff like that.
No, it's awful.
It's awful. You're such a terrible person.
Well, that's all my days.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, that was some questionable news there. It was
a little bit of everything.
It did have a little bit of everything. Some really big stories this week. Some fun stuff. So thank you very much. I'd like to say once again, thank you to every one of you who has already donated on the Patreon, which is patreon.com/Paranormal Sideshow.
Yes.
And if you have not, the Paranormal Sideshow will shut off for you next week.
That's not true.
Just kidding. But to find out more about this, or more about some of the videos that we've made, which are freaking awesome, on YouTube, which you do need to go to and watch, because we're trying to put up a couple a week. Something about a subject, and then the recap show, which is called There's Something Strange About This Week, which is we have a lot of fun with. But if you want to find out all that stuff, or if you want to play at home, follow along with Stacy's stories, which is really fun. I do it sometimes because I always listen back to the episode. It's actually a family night for us. After the episode is completely released, we have a listening session. We go through and listen to every episode, even though we did it, because the strange thing is a lot of times we get in the zone and don't even remember some of the stuff. I'll hear Stacy laughing from the next room as she's editing, and I'll just hear her repeating something that she didn't hear that was said during the show.
Yeah, sometimes I'll text John random comments and he'll be like, what does that mean? And I'm like, you'll see.
Yeah.
You'll see.
You'll see. So anyway, to find out more about all this grooviness, go to paranormalsideshow.com. That's your address for everything groovy. Facebook.com/Paranormal Sideshow. There's a lot of groovy going on. On the Twitter, it's at Sideshow97. Not as much groovy. On Instagram, Hot Groovy Damn, it's John and Stacey Edwards. YouTube.com/Paranormal Sideshow. There's all kinds of cool stuff there, folks. And let me mention a little thing too. However you listen to this, whether it's on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, please leave us a review. Also, I want to put a little shout out there. I waited this year for the whole season of Supernatural to be over before I watched it. So for the next 2 days, I'm going to enjoy myself a little bit of a binge party. And can't wait to watch the Scooby-Doo episode, but because it's all on Netflix now.
Yes.
So I thought we'd share a little bit of our life, and that's what's going to be happening. I don't care what kind of, paranormal stuff happens outside of my window for the next 24 hours or so. I'm going to watch this. But again, the Patreon that we have, it's got all the levels. It tells you everything about it. Patreon.com/Paranormal Sideshow, or you can get all that from paranormalsideshow.com. For my lovely, beautiful wife, Stacy, my name's John. So long from the Sad Show.
Good night.
Hey guys, if you like what you've heard, please check out ParanormalSideshow.com and follow the links for our weekly podcast. Also, become a sideshow off yourself and pick one of our killer levels on our Patreon to help support the channel and help keep us bringing you bigger and better content. So until next week, for my lovely wife Stacy, I'm John Edwards. So long and
stay strange.